Hi, I'm the interracial anime reviewer, and I watched season 2 of the Devil May Cry anime, so you don't have to. In this video, I'll be giving a nonsensical review of the series, so please don't take my opinion too seriously, as I am a dumb chud. Unless of course you agree with me, then clearly I'm based. And obviously, as this is a review, no matter how ridiculous, it will contain spoilers for the second season of Netflix's Devil May Cry, so if you want to avoid that, this is your chance to close the video. If you are deciding to stay, then let's hop right into it. Now, before I really begin, to help you better understand my credibility in giving this totally legitimate review, I watch a lot of anime. Like a lot. And I've played DMC 4 and 5 all the way through multiple times, as well as a little bit of DMC 1, 3, and that god-awful reboot that I'm sorry for even mentioning, but not as sorry as I am for having played that trash. So now that you know my prior experience, I'm ready to tell you my thoughts on Season 2 of Devil May Cry. The first aspect of the show I'd like to talk about is the soundtrack. Now I could tell you about the story or the characters, and I will at some point in this video, but this is Devil May Cry, and as Dante says,
"It works better with music."
The soundtrack to the show features an odd mix of cringy early 2000s music and soundtracks from the games themselves that weirdly kind of did it for me, with additional music from an Australian electronic duo named Power Glove. You'll definitely recognize more than a few of these tracks, and personally, I felt like even the strangest picks, like Avril Lavigne's Skater Boy, were pretty fitting in the moments they used them for. This season also features a new Papa Roach song written for the series called See You in Hell that plays while Dante and Virgil fight, and it turns what is most likely the best scene in the entire show up to 11. My only real gripe I had with the soundtrack is the lack of a dedicated end credit song, like in the previous season where they played Devils Never Cry after each episode, and the shorter intro with more generic music, as opposed to Limp Bizkit, and the horrible, god-awful rendition of Bury the Light that plays during one of the earlier episodes. Like, I genuinely didn't think you could ruin such a peak song so thoroughly, but I was just dead wrong. And the final issue I had is that sometimes the music is just way too damn loud to hear what anyone is saying. I mean, I get that a lot of the budget went to this soundtrack, but I'm not trying to go deaf by 30. Next, I'd like to talk about the animation. Personally, I came into the show looking for killer tunes and dope fight scenes, and on the latter, I gotta say they kinda cooked. And with the amount of heavy hitters they pulled out, they kinda had to. With 2 fight scenes between the Sons of Sparta, several scenes of Virgil moving like he's built different, and even these big kaiju-esque fights with massive demons, and all of it looks incredible. The fights are flashy and clean, and everything from the characters to even the atmosphere itself have this incredible level of detail that make this show just so aesthetically pleasing to look at. I found myself rewinding the fights a lot, not because I had to try to decipher what was happening, but just because they were so cool I wanted to see certain moments again. Like the scene where Dante gets Ebony and Ivory, even though the choreography was from a Corridor Crew skit, was incredible, and I'm pretty sure they got permission to use said choreography, so, no worries there. They also use some art style changes as like a comedic tool, like Dante has this flashback that's all chibi and cutesy until it hard cuts to this like JoJo inspired style, and then Lady's account of the same event has like a noir feel to it, and it plays more dramatic and serious, but both scenes were pretty funny to me. The last thing I want to talk about is this show's use of 3D animation. Now personally, I cannot stand 3D animation in anime. I think it was season 4 of Attack on Titan when they started using it for the Titans, and I've never been more disgusted in my life, since that was one of the first times I saw it used for anything other than like a crowd of people in the background. But honestly, this show's use of it isn't even that bad, and I found myself pretty surprised that I didn't hate it, since its use is kind of sparing, and even when they do use it, the movement is still pretty fluid, unlike other studios' uses. So while I prefer not to see it in anything, at least in this, it wasn't that bad. Now on to my next topic, the story. I gotta be honest, this shit was so ass. Maybe it's because the story was mostly based on DMC 2, which I've heard is like the worst game in the series, obviously not counting the reboot, or maybe the writing is just that bad, but personally I'm a binge watcher, and even though the season was only 8 episodes long, coming in at just over 4.5 hours, I couldn't watch it all in one sitting and had to take breaks after some chunks. I mean, one of the problems of the last season was Dante being sidelined for most of it, and they went and did it again. At least this time he was getting sidelined for Virgil, but honestly, there might be a special place in hell for Adi Shankar with the way he portrayed one of the coolest characters in any piece of media. Anyway, the story opens to a scene of war between the human military and demons, while Lady receives a mission brief where she's expected to infiltrate the castle of Mundus, the king of hell, to retrieve an artifact that she is told can be used to destroy him by Arius von Ehrenberg, the human sorcerer who serves as CEO of Ouroboros, which is Dark Realm Command's parent company. In actuality, Arius needs the Arcana Chalice, which is one of 4 Arcana relics, to resurrect Argosax the Chaos, a demon considered to be a god that ruled hell before Mundus. Meanwhile, after Lady successfully steals the chalice, Mundus sends Virgil to retrieve it, who by the way serves Mundus loyally and willingly as his Nello Angelo because he's been manipulated by Mundus into thinking cultists loyal to Argosax were responsible for the death of his mother and his own torture, while it was really orchestrated by Mundus. Although Virgil initially heads to Earth as an adversary and even fights Dante, who has just been woken up from cryosleep, the two form an alliance of necessity when Arius reveals his true power, absorbs the Arcana Chalice, beats Virgil in a duel using Sparta, and absconds through a portal with both the twins' blood so that he could break the barrier between Earth and Hell. He eventually revives Argosax, Virgil discovers the truth about their mother, Dante and Virgil push the possessed Arius Argosax, whatever, into Hell before he could regain his full power and have Mundus kill him. Despite everything that happens, Dante and Virgil still differ too greatly in opinion, so they fight, and blah blah blah. The story was such a bog, it is unreal. I mean, like 90% of it was just talking, in a series that's supposed to have a focus on stylish action. And yeah, they did deliver that when the action happened, but like the entirety of episode 6 is Dante strapped to a table, yapping with Arius, Virgil stuck in a pocket dimension with a random child, and Lady locked in a pod talking to the vice president. Some parts of this story just move so slowly, and it barely feels like Dante even takes part. The entire first episode he's still in a cryopod, and then he has a psych eval where he just talks to a therapist and Lady. He gets Ebony and Ivory from Nell Goldstein, but other than the two of them having a mutual appreciation for weapons, she doesn't play any more part in the story, and then Virgil shows up and Dante gets his ass beat, and it doesn't really get much better from there. So while I did love the animation and art style, and even all the cringy and corny music that's ripped straight from an edgy middle schooler 2006's playlist, the story was just fucking rough. Another important factor to consider when reviewing a piece of media like this is how it compares to the source material. Now sure, some people might say that comparison is the thief of joy, but I don't really think that applies here, and honestly, not enough people do compare works to similar pieces, especially within the same universe. Don't even get me started on Star Wars fan. Still boggles my mind that some people stand by the sequel trilogy like it wasn't the beginning of the end for good Star Wars media. I haven't watched Andor and Maul yet. But anyway, I had to ask myself, how does this show compare to the Devil May Cry game series? What similarities and what differences do the two have? And honestly, considering I've mostly played the later games, I'm not really qualified to answer those questions, but I'm gonna do my best. There are plenty of references to events from the games that feel off because of changes to the story of the animated series. Like Lady deciding to go by Lady instead of her given name, just because that's what Dante calls her, I guess? Considering how the story is played out, kind of makes the events of DMC 3 hard to faithfully recreate in the show if they do a third season. I guess they kind of just had to shoehorn that in there. Another difference is one closer to home, with Dante's sweet, custom-made twin handguns, Ebony and Ivory. Because in the anime, Dante originally doesn't know he's the son of a demon and doesn't use demonic powers other than strength and regeneration, so he breaks his guns frequently by gripping them too hard, like he's Lenny from A Vice and Men with a rabbit. But the weirdest part of him receiving his iconic weapons is that they're engraved to Tony Redgrave, and Lady makes an offhand comment about finding his old alias. However, this heartfelt message in the games is kind of more like this thing that gives Dante guilt because, after his family's killed and he meets Nell and she helps him out and, supplies him with guns and even gives him this thoughtful piece. It sort of gives him this grief because the whole time that he knew her, he was lying about who he was. A massive change that brings me no small amount of rage is of course Virgil willingly serving Mundus because he's a dumbass, and the show treating Nello Angelo like it's a conscious transformation that Virgil could turn on and off at will. And speaking of Virgil, the man in the plastic chair himself, he comes across quite differently from his game counterpart, mainly because the show delivers a narrative of some demons are good and demons are just a race and not necessarily evil creatures from the Bible, which kind of doesn't make sense because the games are like loosely based off of Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, in which Dante himself travels through hell. But Virgil takes pride in his demon half, like the games, but that pride extends to protecting other demons, which isn't really Virgil's style. And this also leads to Dante and Virgil's battle of ideals feeling a little wrong because Virgil like kind of is the ruthless monster we know him as, but kind of isn't. So like the reason for him fighting Dante just kind of feels stupid. And although there are many more differences than what I've noted here, the last I'll talk about is Sparta. For some reason in the show, Dante and Virgil never knew their father, and he never lived with them, which allows Mundus to claim that Sparta never loved Eva, and she was just a passing fascination to him, which Virgil believes, which is a massive disservice to the guy so respected for his good deeds. Despite being a demon, he has a religious cult following on Fortuna Island. I mean, he woke up to justice, whatever the hell that means, sealed hell off from Earth, and spent centuries guiding and protecting mankind even after he gave up his demonic power, and met the love of his life who he lived with happily until their home was attacked and burned down. Also, Adi Shankar can write him as a deadbeat dad? Now, before I wrap up this review that is totally nonsensical, and since I have no clue what I'm doing, I made a list of random things I liked and disliked from the show, so I'm just going to list them here as a shotgun spray to cover all my bases. The first and most egregious dislike I have is that Dante and Lady kiss, like more than once. And I'm pretty sure they got down and dirty while waiting for a magic man to finish a ritual. Now don't get me wrong, I want the son of Sparta to be happy, and we know Virgil was getting some on Fortuna, but Dante and Lady together is just wrong. Just because she's one of his closest friends and business partner that isn't a demon made to look exactly like his mother, so by default the closest dateable woman to him, putting the two of them together just feels way too much like bad fanfiction, which plenty of people already say this series plays out like anyway, so maybe Adi just said screw it. Another thing I really disliked was the lack of demonic abilities. You know, in any given Devil May Cry game, you spend the entirety of it absorbing demon blood to level yourself up to do cool shit, and that's just largely ignored for some reason. I mean, in like the last episode, Virgil teaches Dante how to imbue his guns with demonic energy, and it's cool, but other than some lame-looking watered-down versions of Virgil's abilities, that's about all they do. I spent the entirety of the time watching, waiting for Virgil to hit like a nasty judgment cut end or shoot some summon swords, and I was severely disappointed, because as cool and flashy as the fights are, these characters all have iconic weapons and moves that just for some reason didn't make the cut. The last dislike I'll mention, maybe I'll throw the others on screen for you to read if you really care, is that Virgil has Schrodinger's aura, meaning that he simultaneously has and does not have any emotion. One moment, he's smirking at a sniper scoped in on him from a distance or cutting through people like they're paper mache, and the next he's bowing down and gargling Mundus's giant stone nuts. Or almost getting captured by humans. I think this perversion of these iconic and beloved characters is a large part of why this animated series has been so poorly received by many fans of the series. As much as I may have disliked large parts of the show, there were some aspects I did truly enjoy, and for fairness sake, I'll list them here. First, I enjoyed the references to demons from the games. Even if they weren't featured in the main story, or even had any lines of real relevance. Like the intro scene is this big battle, and one of the bosses from DMC 5, Goliath, is there tearing shit up, and the foot soldiers in that battle are common enemies from the same game, Scudo Angelo. Little stuff like that, even though I haven't played all the games, was kind of cool to see when I did recognize some of them. The next thing I really enjoyed was some of the goofy stuff they added that kind of feels in character for some of the shit the later games pull, like they referenced the Virgil plastic chair meme, or there's a TV in the background of a scene playing a Maury type show called I Think I Married a Demon, and other little stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't last long before they catapult headfirst into their super serious plot, but I thought some of it was a nice touch. And finally, the last thing I'll praise is the creativity of the scenes. I know I mentioned it earlier, but this show really did have some cool moments that I fucked with heavily, whether it was Dante and Virgil hitting their tandem gunshot inspired by the finishing move on Arkham from DMC 3, or Dante riding a missile like bros playing Fortnite. Even if some of the scenes were inspired by the games or something else entirely, I think that they were translated so beautifully into this show that even though it was a slog getting through some of the story, there were just some of these moments that I really think fondly on, and honestly I'm probably going to go watch back at some point. Now, with all of that out of the way, I'd like to talk about my penultimate topic, the future of Netflix's Devil May Cry series. Whether or not it actually has one, and if so, what that future would look like. Honestly, Netflix is so finicky with some of their original series. So many that I watched and really enjoyed have been prematurely canceled, like Daybreak, I Am Not Okay With This, Lockwood & Co. So honestly, I think it can go either way on if they actually continue the series. But supposedly, the third season is somehow already in production. Now, I don't think that necessarily means it's a given, but don't be surprised in a couple years when this shit gets announced. As for what that story will entail for a third season, I genuinely have no goddamn clue. So the second season ends with Virgil staying in hell to fight Mundus for control, promising Dante he'll be back with an army to invade the Earth, and Lady dips to go find her dad because he's still floating around. So I suppose they could do a bastardized version of DMC 3, seeing as the second season took inspiration from DMC 2. I just think a lot of that cat is already out of the bag. Like, maybe Virgil's gonna get whooped by Mundus and turned into a genuine Nello Angelo, and they'll go like OG DMC route, and then Dante will have to go deal with that or something. They also mentioned Fortuna, but I think it was more like a nod than any real setup, since it'd be a little awkward explaining when Virgil had time to go make Nero, or to find a voice actor for him, considering Johnny Young Bosch already voices Dante. I just don't know. This shit is honestly so scuffed. With this show's track record, the next season genuinely might have Dante jerking off for the first episodes, while it focuses on Lady and Virgil just to cuck Dante at the end too. I guess only time will tell what twisted things Adi Shankar has planned for this series. And that is all I have for this piece I will continue to generously call a review. And speaking of my incredible generosity, I rate this show a 5 out of 10. Now I know what you're thinking, interracial anime reviewer, you must be mentally deficient to rate this show that high. And you'd be right, this show is not life-changing. It is not top tier. It has a rough story and horrendous pacing, but goddamn I have to say that a show with a soundtrack and animation this good is at least mid. Normally, I'm a sucker for a good story. Everything else be damned. I mean, I love Naruto, and the animation in that can be so brutal, so it's just as much a surprise to me, but no matter how boring it was at times, ultimately, I engage with Devil May Cry content for the action, and at least on that front, sparing as it was, this show delivered. So I won't go lower than a 5. Now, to be perfectly clear, I don't recommend watching this show, at least not in its entirety. However, I do think it's worth watching clips of on YouTube. At the very least, this show dropping has made me want to go finish DMC 3, and as much as fans of the games may hate it for not being the same, it doesn't stop you from still enjoying those. I mean, Tokyo Ghoul is one of my favorite mangas, but the anime for it is so tragic in all the wrong ways. So like with that, you just pretend it doesn't exist, and move on with your life. Thank you so much for giving this video a watch. Please let me know your thoughts on the Devil May Cry anime in the comments, if you agree with the points I made or disagree with them. Let me know if you'd like to see me yap about any other anime or manga, although full disclosure, I plan on doing that anyway, but I'd be open to suggestions on what to talk about next. I hope to see you all in the next one.